Okay guys, we are on a roll. Let's keep rolling. We come to Mary sent a book to Bill. So we know that the subject of our sentence is Mary, and we're saying something about the subject of the sentence. We're going to say something that she did, something about how she's feeling, something about what we think of her, right? Anything that you can do in a sentence, you can do with any subject of the sentence. So you've got Mary, what's going on here? Sent a book to Bill out. We're describing an action of sending. Okay, so the sending is going to be the verb. Sent is in the past tense form. That looks like a verb. And then we've got a book to Bill. Well, what's going on here? A book is the thing that gets sent. So therefore, a book is the direct object of the verb sent. And if you only looked at that much of it, you might say, okay, so it's monotransitive because you've got a direct object. But you wouldn't do that, because you would look at the rest of the sentence, to Bill, and you would say, oh, well, to Bill is working as the indirect object because Bill is receiving the book. When you say Mary sent a book to Bill, the recipient of the action of sending is a book, but the recipient of the direct object, the book, is Bill. So you have a direct object and an indirect object. So you have ditransitive. And then keep in mind, whenever you have ditransitive, so this is a good way to sort of test if you're thinking that something could be ditransitive, always just try to see if you can have it in the other format. And then if it's ditransitive, it should be able to appear in the other format. So for example, Mary sent Bill a book. So subject is still Mary, sent still the main verb. Bill is still playing the same role that it was playing in the sentence before, right? Bill is still the recipient of the book. So even though it's occurring first here, it's still the indirect object. And a book is still the thing that was sent. So even though it's not occurring right after the verb sent, it's still the direct object. Why? Because of the meaning. That's why the meaning is crucial. So you know that Bill gets the book. You know that a book gets sent. Therefore, a book is a direct object. Bill is the indirect object, and you have ditransitive again. So when you are suspecting that you have ditransitive, just try to see, is there another way for me to say this sentence that has exactly the same meaning? When you can switch around those two parts at the end of the sentence, you know you're dealing with ditransitive. Okay, so the other types of structures will not allow you to do that switch. Let's look at the girl in the palace dyed her hair purple. Okay, so this is an example of a sentence where the subject is a little bit more complex, because what if we said that the subject of the sentence here was the girl? Well, then we would have this question of, what about in the palace? What are we going to do with that, right? It looks like a prepositional phrase because we've got this preposition in, and it's followed by a noun phrase, the palace. But what is it doing here? What is it doing in the sentence? It's describing the girl. Aha. So in other words, it's part of the subject. The whole subject of this sentence is the girl in the palace. Everything that goes before the main verb is going to be considered the subject. And you just want to make sure that everything that is in that unit is talking about the subject of the sentence. So the girl in the palace, that whole thing is a subject, and then you've got your main verb dyed, it's in past tense, and then you've got her hair purple. And you think to yourself, okay, what's going on? Her hair is the thing that was dyed, right? It received the action of dyeing. So it semantically is the direct object. What about purple? Purple is describing her hair. She did something to her hair to change the color of her hair until it became purple. So purple describes her hair. after the dyeing process, right? Therefore, we know that purple is an object complement. It's describing the direct object of the sentence, and therefore we have a complex type. So verb, direct object, object complement, that's always going to be complex. We don't allude to his third year. Okay, guys, I didn't come up with this example. I want you to know this is from the book, so I don't do weird sentences, but whatever. We know our subject is we. That is the topic of the sentence, and then the next part, the predicate, we expect to tell us something about that topic. So don't allude to his third ear. What is going on with this don't? We haven't really talked about expressions like don't. We've just been talking about main verbs. But notice that in English, when you have the negative counterpart to a positive sentence, so if you had the sentence, we allude to his third ear, we can't just say we not allude to his third ear, which is interesting, and which is something that people who are learning English as a second language will say, well, why is that necessary? Because really what you're meaning to express is the subject and then negation and then the verb and whatever else it is that you have in that particular sentence. So there's no semantic reason why in English we have to say don't, which is interesting. And if you want to know more about that, then you have to continue studying linguistics, because that's one of the things that linguistics looks at these puzzles of English is behaving this way, but it doesn't need to. It's not logical that English should be like this. So it's like that because English is a human language, and human languages have different features that are not determined by the means of communication, right? We tend to think of language as the way that we communicate with each other, but if that actually were all that language is, we wouldn't have any of the complexity that we have here, right? Because it would be much easier to do it with something that would be far less complex. Why have direct objects and object of the preposition and subject complement and all of this stuff, right? All of it is unnecessary unless you think there's just something about the structure of language that allows it to be the way that it is, that allows that complexity, and maybe that requires that complexity. So, we don't allude to his third ear. If you want to know about don't, you have to keep taking linguistics. We see that the main verb is allude, and then we've got this to his third ear. So how would we know that this is definitely not a direct object? Well, we've got this to here. We've got a preposition, and whenever we have a preposition, we don't have just a noun phrase. We know that the direct object is always and only a noun phrase. So given that we've got this to here, we need something else to be going on. And we could think about it, to is followed by his third ear. And when you think to yourself, well, what is his third ear doing in relationship to alluding? It seems to be the complement of alluding. So what is going on here is that you have this prepositional complement to his third ear, and therefore allude to his third ear is of the prepositional sort. So we say that to his third ear is the prepositional complement, PC, and then the type is prepositional. Clara fainted. So an example of one of the more simple structures that we have where we have nothing following the verb. You could just, Clara fainted, that's the end of the sentence. We know the first piece must be the subject, the second piece must be the predicate. So Clara, indeed, is the noun phrase subject, and then fainted is going to be the predicate. There's nothing following this guy, nothing is required, in fact, nothing can occur here. If you say, Clara fainted the floor, you just be like, well, why did you say it that way? You can't express that concept with those words. So the reason that you can't do that is because fainted is serving as an intransitive verb here. It requires no complement. It must occur just on its own. So we say you have intransitive verb phrase here, and then the sun set. This looks similar. We've got our subject, the sun, and then what is occurring after it is just the single word set. That's the main verb of the sentence, and it completes the sentence. You don't need more information. Therefore, this guy is going to be intransitive. Okay? So monotransitive, verb plus direct object. Intransitive, just the verb, no direct object, no anything else. Ditransitive, verb plus direct object plus indirect object, and always check to make sure that you can switch those two. That will tell you that for sure it's ditransitive. Let's see, what do we have here? Intensive, she was happy. Happy is going back to she. Happy is not talking about somebody else in the sentence. You have to understand it as describing the subject. Therefore, you have a subject complement, and therefore you have the intensive type of verb phrase. What else could be going on? You could have complex. So they determined Peter fit, something like that. They determined Peter fit. Determined is the main verb. Peter is receiving the action of that verb, and fit is telling you about Peter. It's referring back to Peter. So therefore it's an object complement, and it's going to be complex. The last type of verb phrase that we have is what we're calling the prepositional, and this is the one that there are very few of them in English, and there are words like glance, look, if you peer. There are a few other examples of verbs that are prepositional in English. They're listed under that section in the chapter on the verb phrase types. But basically what you have here is a requirement to have a preposition.